was doing that introduction, I had it on my screen rather than rather than where it should be. So I apologise for that. Too much happening at the same time. That's the problem. But it's great that you could be with us also today and talk about Indigenous incarceration and also kids in care and how Indigenous kids in care and the proportion of those kids that are in care and how that impacts them and what we can start to do about caring for the Indigenous community. So welcome to Child Protection Party TV. Us get through the day and to talk about things that are important to us all. I'd like to welcome the wonderful, the great, the fantastic, the dubious, the incredibly intelligent and wise, the fantastic, the one and only Avery Hilditch. Hi, Avery.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate.
I'm not going to say anything about your description of me. I'll just accept it.
Oh, thank you very much. I was trying to think how long I can go with descriptive words that describe you that aren't insulting. You know?
Well, I could say one word you could use about me, but I won't.
No,
not because it's rude, because it would no doubt offend a lot of people.
Even though it wouldn't offend you.
Even though it wouldn't offend me.
So I thought one of the things, though, that has been on my mind recently has been around the number of incarcerations that we have concerning Indigenous people, Avery, and also the number of kids that were in care, and also the number of kids, which is all part of the same thing, Indigenous people incarcerated, and also the number of deaths that have occurred in Australia. And I guess one of the things that concerns me is our how can I put it? Our lack of interest, I guess, around a lot of this subject. Why it is that we choose to do nothing, say nothing, and as you'll see by some of the statistics, everybody that we're going to present you shortly, a lot of this is a major concern because the statistics will tell us that things aren't the way that they perhaps should have been or could have been. And maybe it's about, Avery, our inaction. Maybe we just aren't interested enough, even though I know that the news articles come out and they tell us these things, but we seem to do nothing about it. Do you think have you got an explanation for any of that?
No. The one
that was quick. This will be an easy conversation to have.
Yeah, it will be. The number of deaths in custody, the number of Indigenous people that end up in jail compared to white, a thing you could leap to immediately is racism. But I don't know that I want to jump that far straight away, if you know what I mean.
Well, I guess the question for me is, why wouldn't we consider the fact that perhaps one of the reasons why these issues are not raised in the same way and why they don't develop the same sort of energy, I guess, that happens in the US? Is it because we're too lethargic? Is it because it's too commonplace? Is it because that for our 200 years, this has just been the way it has been for Indigenous people, and generally people don't give a stuff?
Oh, very often I think that, very much I think that could well be the case. I mean, Australia, like the USA, has got a sad history of the way it treated its Indigenous peoples. I say sad, it's an atrocious history. When I was first told about Aboriginal people being kept in chains, I didn't believe it. And then I saw the photographs, and I knew what they'd done in the United States, and before the United States was founded. I mean, June the 2nd, 1620 was the arrival of the first ship full of slaves into the Americas, into North America. Sorry, May the 28th it was, not June the 2nd. And the history in the United States has been atrocious. I just didn't believe, Australia, wonderful people, they wouldn't treat the indigenous people like that, and then I learned the truth.
Well,
Uh,
why would you think that? Because the British people have been treating people like that for years.
they've been treating people like that for
For
yeah a long time. There's no doubt.
thousands of years. I mean,
Yeah,
the greatest imperialists of our time before the United States discovered weapons happened to be Britain,
yeah.
and they enslaved people in the same sort of way as the US did as well. So I mean,
Oh, what?
the British are just as responsible for this
Oh, yeah,
because,
yeah.
after all, who was it who populated the US?
It depends what part of the US you're talking about. In the northern parts, it was the British and the French. In the southern parts, it was the Spaniards.
Oh,
So it
that's
does.
true because of Mexico and stuff. But
Yeah,
and a lot of parts.
no,
Oh,
not Mexico and stuff.
from
Florida,
Mexico.
Texas, Arizona, Nevada, California. They were all
Oh,
Spanish.
all right. So
Uh,
Mexico's too
and then
far west, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just showing my ignorance about American political history and geography. That's all. But I guess the point is that as a species, we have been enslaving others
yes,
since the day dot. No matter who you
yeah.
are, no matter where you come
And
from.
as far as the UK is concerned, you're right. They've got a terrible history they were one of the major slave traders in the 1700s. But it was in the long before the United States. I think something like 30 years before the United States banned slavery that it was banned in Britain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a guy
Okay.
called Wilberforce that led the campaign to get slavery abolished in Britain and its colonies.
In what year would that have been?
Yeah, it's in about the 1820s or the 1830s, something like that.
Right. It wasn't until the 1860s. When was the Civil War in the US? That was the
It was
1850s to 60s, somewhere in there.
1860s.
Yep.
In the US, slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, and the 15th Amendment to the Constitution in 1873, I think it was, gave them the right to vote.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act in 1967 was signed by LBJ that they actually got the right to vote.
Yeah. Which is
And
important.
I
That,
believe here it was something like 1972, wasn't it, before Indigenous people got the right to vote?
1966.
66 was it? Okay.
Mm.
I wasn't exactly sure. I knew it was sometime.
So yes, and so I mean that's shocking to think in itself, isn't it? That in
Yeah,
our lifetime,
yeah,
that the Indigenous people were unable to vote because they were seen as, I don't know,
yeah,
non-human. I don't know. I don't know how people saw them, but they didn't think they had I don't know, whatever it takes to be able to cast a ballot. I think people thought that. And,
yeah,
the interesting thing though is that in Australia, it's Indigenous people are 2% of our population, and African Americans are 17% of the American population.
yeah,
So I guess there are, and because they have a population of 350 million, I guess there are kind of, I'm not making an excuse for us doing nothing because I think that's appalling in itself. But when you
yeah.
think of the comparisons, there are certainly a heck of a lot more African Americans who can stand up and protest.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
but one of the things that I've been really excited about is the number of white people that are standing up with the Americans. Now, during the mid '60s, when there was the civil rights movement, there were certainly some white people that were facing off against
Oh,
the white.
there was a lot of white people,
But no,
but
some of the
the numbers now are much greater
well,
of white people standing up for it.
those people that were back in the '60s fighting for their rights, the African Americans, they will say that now there are far more. So they're seeing it as far more
Yeah,
expansive movement, I
yeah,
guess, to bring about change, and hopefully it will. And I think there are some important lessons that we could learn from this experience as well, because some of our statistics, and I'll just bring one up here. This is the page I was on when I shouldn't have been on this page at the very beginning. So here it says, although Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders adults make up around 2% of the national population, they constitute 27% of the national prison population.
which is
Automatically.
atrocious.
In 2016, around 20 in every 1,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were incarcerated. And there's another one here down here which says Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women constitute 34% of the female prison population. So the rate of imprisonment of women is even greater than the national average.
Yeah,
What does that tell us?
Was it 464.8 per 100,000?
Yep. That's atrocious figure, though.
And how many non-Indigenous people are, what's the percentage of those, if you know what I mean? Say Anglo-Saxons,
Well, we don't know whether they're all Anglo. I don't know the breakdown of them.
No, I was asking. I wasn't expecting you to be able to answer it. I was asking a question.
Can't. There you go.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. It's a good question. What's the breakdown? But we can assume that the balance is majority white because the population is majority white.
Oh yeah.
So that goes without saying, I guess.
But it's the rate of incarceration.
Yeah.
Just quickly, Michelle Mitchell has just responded to my, when I was saying about Indigenous people getting the vote in around about 1972. Michelle has said that she thinks it was in 1972 that they were removed from, Aboriginal people were removed from being identified as flora and fauna.
Yeah.
If they were identified as flora and fauna, it tells you exactly what the white people thought of them.
Yeah.
They were just lesser animals, if you know what I mean.
Well, it was almost like they're saying they could be used for our own use, like picking flowers. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just a bizarre statement, isn't it, Abe? So,
yeah.
But it does indicate exactly how the people of the time were thinking about Indigenous people, and it's sad. And Steve Helwig says, "Hello, Steve. Good to hear from you, mate.
Yeah.
Very good to hear from you." Okay, so that's. So I guess the point is that the number of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders is really low, but the number of incarcerations is really high.
Yeah.
So what's causing that? So a lot of people will argue that is about. Oh, hold on, I think it has actually has got it here. Okay, I'll just bring this up. It talks about it here. The economic position of Aboriginal people, the health situation, their housing requirements, their access or non-access to an economic base, including land and employment, their situation in relation to education, and the part that played by alcohol and other drugs and its effects. So these are the reasons why Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders are suffering in the way that they are, because we, that is us white folks, those that tend to run the country, have not been able to address the primary issues that brought them there in the first place.
Yeah, I think some of this, it just occurred to me that I think that some of this is the white attitude that we are civilized, and if you're not white, you're not, and therefore it's our duty to tell these poor savages, quote unquote, how they should live their lives and things like that. A very patriarchal way of looking at other people. It's looking down on them. It's, you know what I mean. They're lesser than they're lesser than we are because they're not white, and that's disgusting.
I mean, it casts my mind back to those days. Not that I have a mind that goes back this far, because I just haven't been around that long. But, the need to keep people uneducated. The churches would keep people uneducated because, heaven forbid, if they learned, they would have critical thinking. And if they had critical thinking, they might actually challenge some of the status quo. So, it's almost the same thing So I just wonder whether there's also underlying prejudice is like a fear that, these people may become more powerful than we are or even equal to us.
Yep.
And therefore they would have power and influence and they would overthrow us. So I just wonder whether that's part of the problem as well.
Yeah, well, as far as the impact of religion is concerned, Napoleon said that religion was useful because it helped to control the masses. Keep them ignorant and you can control them.
Yeah. So,
and it didn't matter whether the masses were white You know, light brown, dark brown, yellow. He didn't care. Keep them ignorant with, you know, by use religion to keep them ignorant, because religion's, Christianity in the Bible, in the New Testament, it says don't question, just
So the
accept.
masses, it was like the masses though were those people that were in poverty, which was almost everybody. So,
Yeah,
so they're the ones that had to sort of stay under the thumb, I guess, and not to question what was going on. And I guess
yeah.
that's the way, you know, when they arrived here in 1700, whenever it was. Um, they, how terrible is my history, man? I can't remember the exact date now.
1788 was the arrival of the first fleet.
All right. So, thanks.
You were
It's
born here,
always
I
been good.
wasn't.
It's always been good to be told by a British person when they arrived here. I think
Yeah.
that's quite significant. But you know, like, what are we? How far? How far? You know, like, don't you want to know how far we've progressed in terms of recognising the problems that sit for the people that were here before we were, long before we were,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just a
Well,
wonderful way.
there's research that I read I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It was from the United States, about the United States, but I'm sure it would apply here and other Western countries, Britain, France, etc. As religion declined, as the number of people who believed in God declined, the education, part of it was because of the rise of education. And one of the things that came with it was the realization that just because somebody is black doesn't make them subhuman or anything like that. They're people just like we are.
Mm.
And anybody that, if you study the genome of me and compare it to this chap that's mentioned on a Guardian article I've got in front of me, David Dungay, who died in custody, an Aboriginal man who died in custody a couple of years ago, or some time ago. I'm not exactly sure when. But if you compare our genome, there's very, very little difference between the two. He is as much a human being as I am. He's no different to me. Skin color, culture is different, obviously, right? But as far as his humanity is concerned, there's no difference between me and him, and there's no difference between you and Xi Jinping in China, or whatever. We are
Yeah.
all human beings, and
Ain't that the truth? And
yeah,
a stating of the bloody obvious. But
yeah,
it is indicative, so what diverges away from the fact that we're all humans to want to define us all as being different. And, because we're different, we can therefore be treated differently.
yeah,
That's just damn unhelpful. So, now that you mention it, though, we want to just get to this this other one, which is really about the deaths in custody.
yeah.
And this is amazing stuff. So, this is happening in Australia,
Right now,
and has been happening here for a long, long time. And I just can't remember over what period this one is. That article, Avery, can you remember what
that article,
period?
I
So
can
that
tell you.
was since 1991. I just had a look.
Yeah,
At
that's since 1991. The article itself, I'm just looking when it was. It's from the Guardian.
Yeah.
I'm just looking to see if I can see when the story was actually published.
Yeah. So it was.
I can't see when it was actually published.
Doesn't matter.
No.
Because it talks about. So it must be recent because it's talking about George Floyd.
Oh, sorry, found it. June the 1st.
Right. So now it's this year.
Yeah.
Because they did know about George Floyd prior to this.
Yeah.
So, so the interesting thing about this article is that it highlights, and we'll just read portions of it, I guess, for you.
Yeah.
Aboriginal people whose family members have died in custody express solidarity with people on the streets of US cities protesting against the death of George Floyd. Australia's track record on deaths in custody is again under scrutiny, and why wouldn't it be, given that we kind of stuff up around this stuff all the time, and we seem to ignore the issues. As Aboriginal people, and the similarities, I guess, that exist between what happens for Indigenous peoples here as well. As Aboriginal people whose family members died in similar circumstances, George Floyd expressed solidarity with protesters on the streets of major US cities following the death of the unarmed black man. And I just highlighted here, because this is important, the family of 26-year-old David Dungay, a Dunguti man, who said, "I can't breathe." So the thing that,
He said it 12 times.
he said it 12 times. That's right. Said it 12 times before he died, while being restrained by 5 prison. Does this all sound familiar in terms of George Floyd stuff? Said they have been traumatised anew by the footage of Floyd's death, and why wouldn't you? And I've just highlighted a bit below that says, when I heard him say, "I can't breathe" for the first time, I had to stop it, Silver said, talking about Floyd, I think. My thoughts really go out to the family and everyone on the streets in the USA. My solidarity is with them because I do know the pain they are feeling. And it just goes on just briefly to say, and as for the Aboriginal deaths in our backyard, it's not the public as much as it should. It's not made public as much as it should be, and that is so true. And that's the reason why we're talking about it now.
Yeah. Have you got that table that I shared with you earlier on?
I think I do. I have the technology.
Yeah, good.
So I've now brought it up, Avery.
Since 1991, there's been 432 Aboriginal deaths in custody, and as I recall, there hasn't been a single police officer or correctional officer who has been convicted of any crime.
Yeah. So why aren't we? So here's this is actually a list of all the names, isn't it? From in what period?
That is 99 of the 432 that have died since 1991, and that is since there was a Royal Commission about Aboriginal deaths in custody in 1999, ended in 1991.
That's 29 years, right?
29 years. Yeah.
Right. So over 29 years, there've been 432 deaths in custody.
Yeah.
That is 432 more than there should be.
Yeah.
And why isn't it that we're not having? So why isn't it that we don't have the same level of rage that has been created in the United States when we're behaving in exactly the same way? Like, who's, and as you said, no policemen, 400 odd murders.
Well, no, not deaths in custody. It's not. That doesn't mean murders.
No, deaths in custody mean they do hang them. People have hung themselves.
Yeah, they might have hung themselves. They might have fallen down the stairs or something like that.
But the one of them we were referring to earlier, which I'll just get back again. So David
Dungay.
Yeah.
Said, "I can't breathe" 12 times.
So in that case, let's just take the one. I won't over exaggerate the issue again. But David Dungay, what happened? Was that policeman prosecuted in any way?
Yeah, I haven't read the entire article because we had to start this live feed. So I don't know whether it says that any legal action was taken against the police officer or correctional officers concerned.
Well, there is just below this. I'll bring this up.
No, he was restrained by 5 prison guards, right? But it doesn't say whether those 5 prison guards faced any legal, whether there was any legal consequences. But a guy called Jess, can't remember the name now, an Aboriginal person, they said with that list that you just put up there, they were the that's the person that shared it with me, and they said that that not a single police officer or correctional officer had ever been convicted for any of the deaths.
Well,
and as I just said, 432 deaths does not mean 432 murders.
No, I understand that.
It could have been negligence. It could have been accidental.
However, they happened in custody.
Yeah.
And that's a bit like the issue around child protection, where kids die while on the guardianship of the minister. Does that make it okay?
No.
No, not under any circumstance. So
when the police arrest somebody and that person gets jailed, as soon as they're arrested, the police have got a duty of care when that person, if that person ends up in jail, then the correctional services have got a duty of care.
Yeah.
And if a person dies in either in police custody or in the prison, then if that death should be investigated, preferably not by the police or the correctional services. It needs to be an independent person or group that investigates them.
Well, normally a coroner would they not?
Well, I'm not going to say yes or no because I don't know.
Well, often
I would hope so.
Often the coroner will be the person that endeavours to explain
How
deaths under difficult circumstances.
okay? How closely related, if you like, are the police, the correctional services, and the coroner?
I think they're completely separate. Yeah, I mean our experience working with the coroner and the Chloe Valentine case, for example,
Yep.
was that he was quite separate from and gave a decision that was independent of any government government
Okay.
body.
I know that in the United States, the coroner or the medical examiner, they and the path labs that do DNA analysis, etc., they are all closely related to the they've worked very closely with the police forces.
You're watching too much CSI, mate. Or whatever the shows are in the US that talk about that. But I guess the other thing I wanted to note here was that in September, 29-year-old Joyce Clark was shot dead by a police officer outside her house in Geraldton in Western Australia. At the time, police said they were called into Yamaji woman's house by her family, and that during an incident at the address, an officer discharged their firearm, causing a woman to receive a gunshot wound. Now, did this woman have a gun? I guess we don't know the circumstances under which she was shot, but as you said, so the police officer pleads not guilty, and he remains on bail. So I guess that's a situation where perhaps they have taken some action against him, but there's no one sitting out there saying that he should be locked up or he should be charged for murder or whatever the case might be. There's no one out there actually doing that. So,
well, he's been charged with something. It doesn't say what he's been charged with.
No.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yes, it does. Constable Zachary Rolfe was later charged with murder.
Oh, sorry, it was. That teaches us we should read these things further down, I think, right?
Yeah.
And not be so rushed.
Well, I only found that article 5 minutes before we started.
Yeah, but where does it... okay. So where did the idea come from that no one's ever been charged? Or is it that no one's ever been found guilty?
Didn't. It wasn't that nobody had been charged. No one has been convicted.
Convicted.
Yeah.
Okay. So this could be the first. A long time coming, though, if it is.
If it's the first, then
and where's... Yeah. And okay, but that's not my point. My point is, where is our outrage about this happening at all?
One of the thoughts that occurred to me about that was in the United States, the majority of the African Americans live in the cities and large towns. I don't believe that's the case with the Aboriginal community in Australia.
Don't know the percentage. I know that there's a fair percentage, though, that probably do live within cities.
Yeah.
But you know, we tend. It'd be interesting to look up that stat, wouldn't it?
I'm looking at it right now.
So Avery, the researcher, is on the go. So stand back and watch and see what happens. So we don't. I've just noticed, Avery, we don't have much activity. I don't know.
Wow.
What?
81%. Wow.
What's that?
In 2016, the majority of Aboriginal people lived in cities and non-remote areas. Wow, I thought it was a lot less.
I was going to say, I thought it was quite high, but I didn't want to seem like I was a know-it-all.
Yeah, well...
it's higher than we think.
Yeah.
And this is where often people become disenfranchised from their land, too, because they move out of their traditional land and live in cities where they simply often don't feel understood.
Yeah.
because they're not living in the traditional way, I guess. But it'd be interesting to follow this story through, though, Avery. If this person is found guilty,
Yep.
what sort of penalty is offered as a result?
It's a murder
and what-
charge, so it could carry a life sentence.
Well, which is 20, 25 years. So,
Yeah.
so it'd be interesting for us to follow that through and let all those wonderful people watching us know exactly
Yeah.
how that turns out as well. So we'll keep an eye on that. We do apologise for not being as informed about this as what we should have been. We're informed a lot about lots of things. There's certain things though that slip through our fingers, really.
Yeah.
But I just want to come to a topic which we are quite well informed about, I guess, and that's the number of kids in care that are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders. And I've just brought up, so I've got so this is not new. Like, we've known this forever, that Indigenous people are primarily, and it's actually, given that stat you just mentioned, Avery,
Yeah.
don't you think it's interesting that the number of kids in care are a large number? Because where do we find most Department of Child Protection officers?
Where do we find them?
Yeah.
That I don't know.
Well, mainly in cities,
Oh, sorry. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So if most Indigenous people are situated within cities, then they're going to be investigated
Yeah.
by white, young, female, inexperienced people.
Yep.
At the end of the day, and we know that for a fact. So, so here on this article says, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are overrepresented in child protection and out-of-home care services compared to non-Indigenous children. The reason for this complex, I hate the word complex, it's almost like saying this is so involved.
Too hard.
You would
Too
not.
hard.
You,
Too hard work.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You would not understand, or complicated. I hate that one as well. And are connected to past policies and the legacy of colonialisation. And I certainly agree with that. Poverty, assimilation policies, intergenerational trauma and discrimination and forced child removals have all contributed to the overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in care, as has lack of understanding of the cultural differences in child rearing practices and family structure. Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission. That was from one of their reports. So, I think that's important. That this document, though, Avery, came from the Child, Family and Community Australia, which is the Australian Institute of Family Studies.
Yeah.
So this is an Australian report admitting that these are the issues that confront Indigenous people, yet most of us do nothing about this either.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to? These are like questions I continually ask, and I don't ever have an answer because I think I have a sense as to what the answers should be, but that's different from actually finding ways to implement them. But, like they have what they call PAC workers, which is professional Aboriginal consultants, I think, that work within the department in South Australia. They only have a handful of them. When you can consider the number of Indigenous kids that are removed, which is extraordinary, given the size of the population, like, was it 35% of Indigenous people? It's really high.
35%. That 35% you mentioned earlier was the number of Aboriginal women in custody.
That's custody. No, there's a high percentage as well, similar to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Can't find it at the moment. But anyway, a high percentage of Indigenous people are removed, kids are removed, and the number of workers that they have working to help those people is really, really minimal, which is rather sad because they're like you're going to have the cultural stuff that sits around Indigenous people impacts the way they rear their kids, impacts the way the kids either go to school or don't go to school, or impacts the way that within that family in particular, I guess the way they generally conduct themselves, which may not be the same as other people. And that we need to accept that those are different ways of being. It doesn't mean that that they're being maltreated. It just means it's different. That's all it means. And it doesn't mean, and it means that when we take kids I mean, when we take any kid from their biological parents, it's horrific for
Yeah.
everybody. But if we take kids away from, particularly Aboriginal kids away, and we're re-traumatising them because of their history, Avery, we're going to be creating a generation of traumatised children because their generation before them were also traumatised.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Couple of things here. First one, how do we solve the issue of Aboriginal children being, or Torres Strait Islander children being taken away from their parents? We need to ask the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people what it is that they, we need to involve them in the discussions. We need them to be leading us, not us leading them, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
And the other thing I just found is on the Sydney Morning Herald, October last year, it said a study released in Canberra in October last year showed that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are now 10.2 times more likely to be removed from their families than non-Indigenous children. And that had just about doubled since 2006, when it was 5.7 times more likely.
And that's the case. We as a Child Protection Party have been making for a long time, is that we're creating another generation of the stolen generation.
Yeah.
And why don't people hear or see? They don't even have to listen to us. They just have to look at the statistics and ask themselves, why is this happening? So the people that are making the decisions are making the decisions on often the way a Western culture is supposed to be doing things versus understanding the way another culture might be doing things.
Yeah, which is why I said we need to be asking, letting the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people lead the discussion.
Well, no, better than that. I think we need to allow them to have the power and authority to do what they need to do to make sure that their communities are safe. They need that authority.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that... and it doesn't seem all that hard for me to understand that the solutions to some of these problems could be staring us in the face.
Yeah. But it appears to be rocket science to the state and federal governments.
So it's the same old story, and it's the same story around deaths in custody, incarceration rates. I mean, it's the same story about everything. That we either don't understand it or we lack the will to make the changes that are important. And one of the problems is we come from our perception, our values of the way things should be, when in actual fact, the solution may sit by understanding other people's values and perspectives rather than thinking that ours are the only ones that work. Because clearly, how many times do we have to continue to have this discussion about how stuffed the child protection system is, how stuffed, Indigenous affairs are in this country, and that we can spend billions of dollars and have done so in trying to rectify these problems. And I'm sure that the answers sit there at some level. It's just that no one's ever had the friggin' guts to address them.
Yeah. As I've said many a time, one of the reasons I think that it doesn't really get addressed, they just sort of paper over the cracks, is that children don't vote.
Yeah.
So there's no incentive for the governments to do anything to really address the issues.
I've made that argument many, many times myself, Avery, as you well know. But those children that were traumatised or that were removed, or that people that know of other kids that were removed, grandparents, uncles, aunties, other siblings, whoever, they grow up to vote.
Yeah. And they've all got good memories, and they'll remember how they were treated and what was done with them,
and siblings, even siblings that were made with their parents, but one or two of the other might have been separated and placed in foster care or with another kinship care or whatever. They know what that feels like.
Yeah.
Right. And there are hundreds of thousands of people that at some level have had that experience about being removed or knowing someone that has been removed and the impact that's had on their lives.
Yeah.
They vote.
I was just going to say how can I put it? It has a much greater. There's a much greater proportion of Aboriginal people that are affected per head of population, if you know what I mean, than non-Indigenous. But the numbers of non-Indigenous, they're going to be exactly the same. They're going to have these memories of how they were treated, taken away from their family and stuff like that.
Yep. Of course they are. And
Yeah.
they pass. And what we don't understand is that trauma, we're starting to understand it now about intergenerational trauma.
Yep.
But that trauma that we feel, that is kind of like it becomes embedded in their DNA.
Yeah.
Right? Literally becomes embedded in their DNA. And that flows over from family to family to family. Now, at some point, we need to be able to turn that around. And I know that people do. I know that people that have been highly traumatised and have intergenerational trauma find ways to deal with that. And some of them are extremely successful. And they find ways to break that cycle. And that's fine. But they're the minority.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of other people need assistance to find ways to break those burdens that sit around them in terms of the familial and continual disruption of these families, because we keep taking them away, the kids away from their parents.
Yeah.
When are we going to learn?
I don't know.
Now, before we close, Avery, are there anything that you would like to talk about in terms of anything the party's doing that is of interest that you think people need to know about?
We do have another virtual town hall coming up.
All right. When's that?
I'm just going to check on the actual date. I think it's the 28th of this month.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually put it in there. I'll go and check my calendar. I know that we were planning.
Well,
we were planning one.
You put an event. Events on Facebook anyway.
The 27th of June, and we'll be talking about domestic violence and its impact on children.
Right, and it'll be a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
And we'll have a number of people that have had some experience in that area. And
Yeah.
if you're watching and you think that you would like to participate in the virtual town hall, then please let Avery know.
Yeah.
And he will possibly book you in depending on what you have to say.
And also, Tony, on the day, we'll be providing a link, because it'll be done via Zoom. We'll be providing a link where people can click and join and have their say live on Facebook with us and the panel.
Yep, and we might have to pop some of those people into another room on Zoom while we have that conversation. We don't know how that's yet going to work. We can't have 100 people all on Zoom at the one time. I guess Avery would go bananas trying to control all that.
I would.
So we have to find a way to organise that, and there are ways to do that through Zoom. So, certainly that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just a matter of okay, we're ready to talk to John Smith. Click and admit him. Okay, thanks, John. Click and he's out. He's gone from the conversation, sort of thing.
Yep, and you'll be great at that. You'll love it. Clicking on these people and telling them to piss off.
I'm a control freak.
Yeah, that's true. So, what other things have happening? So we're still working on the adoption policy is still in play. The Indigenous policy, which is being designed and formulated by Indigenous people, is still in play.
The adoption policy is being worked on by people who were adopted.
That's right.
It's not us telling adopted people what the rules should be. It's them telling us what they think.
So actually, one of the policies that we don't talk about within the Child Protection Party is really the value of lived experiences. And that we really love hearing from those people. I speak every day to those people that have had experiences around child protection system and how it's impacted them. That's how I learn. That's how we all learn. And in order to be able to formulate eventually legislation that's going to make a difference in this space, we're going to have those voices in there as well to formulate the legislation that they believe would have helped them had it been available when they were placed into care. So, it's really important.
There's one thing that I find frustrating, excuse me, is the number of people that will comment on our posts, and I'll say, write to me and tell me about this, and let's see what we can do. Never hear anything. You know, somebody might come up with a really good idea, and I say, okay, please write to me, secretary at childprotection.party or avery.hilditch at childprotection.party. Send me an email all about this, and we can look at it and work on it maybe. And I never get a response.
It's also those people that criticise us. I love them. Bring it on. You know, like if they, like I've had people. I had someone say to me the other day, I wrote a post that was critical of Donald Trump. I don't know if you saw that one, Avery, but someone wrote back to me saying, you know, you've never done any reading, you know, and like, you don't know who in the hell I am. You don't know what I've read and haven't read. And so I wrote back, I can actually recite the books of the Bible. I bet you can't.
Yeah.
You know, like I spent 21 years in Sunday school. So I know, and I was a Sunday school teacher at one point. So, you know, I know what that, and don't hold that against me, Avery, please. That's my past.
Well, I used to go to Sunday school.
Yeah, look what it did to you, mate.
Yeah, it turned me into an atheist.
Well, that's right. So it's not helpful. So, yeah, like... You know,
it was.
I had... So the one about Jimmy Kimmel that I put up...
Yeah.
So that was a post that I saw last night. I watched Jimmy Kimmel live on YouTube. Anyway, I saw that. So I just cut out that little bit that he says about white privilege, and then put it up on the internet on our Facebook page, because I thought his explanation of white privilege was quite brilliant.
Yeah.
Right? It's the best I've ever heard. It's exactly how I think, but he actually worded it really well. And so I thought I'd pop it up, and someone pops up and says he's a pedophile. And then I look at that person's page, and everybody on the page is a freaking pedophile. Like, you know, like, oh. And there's this. I'm on the bandwagon now. There's a woman who peddles in all this conspiracy theory stuff.
Yeah.
I don't even know who this woman is. I mean, hats off to her. She has thousands and thousands of people watch her live feeds, and she just, so she draws this line between, if we all go to one school, and then if someone goes to that school, even if it be 10 years later, but originally there was a pedophile in that school, then somehow that person becomes a pedophile, like it's a disease.
Yeah.
That, you know, and if you had a famous father who did something wrong, you know, 40, 50 years ago, somehow you're tainted with the same brush because of something stupid that your father did. You know, and it's just these... and I think, you know, I live in what I think is two worlds. It's a rational world, but it's also an emotional world.
Yeah.
And I think I'm okay at combining those two and understanding where they all fit. I like both of them, right? But some people's worlds are just bizarre, and without rationality, and without any really deep emotion either, because some of these people don't realise the damage they do by making assumptions about people they do not know.
Yeah.
You know? Now, look, I know that there's lots about Donald Trump I don't like. And I'm suspicious about some of the things he's done in the past, right, in relation to kids. But I'm not going to say that he is one of those things, because I actually don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like
that comment that you to that Jimmy Kimmel video that you put up, I had a look this morning to see where it might have come, what might have prompted the idea, and I found a story about how back in 2018. They had a senatorial election in Alabamistan, Alabama.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, you heard what I said. Judge Roy Moore was one of the candidates, and you may recall that he was accused by someone that when she was 14 or 15, he made sexual advances to her.
Yeah, a few women actually.
And then, then I say a few other women came out and said exactly the same thing, that when they were teenagers below the age of consent, Judge Roy Moore made made sexual advances to them. Trump supported Moore. Sean Hannity came in and supported Trump, and then accused Jimmy Kimmel of being a paedophile. This is what I read on, I think it was USA Today. I read that this morning. And from there, Trump apparently retweeted the accusation that Jimmy Kimmel was a paedophile, and the right-wing media grabbed hold of it, and it just went viral.
Jimmy Kimmel. Now, I don't know the man personally, but I know he watches our feeds, Avery.
Yeah,
he's in the US now at 3:00 in the morning, waking up just to tune into you and I.
I'm sure he is,
and
I'm sure Trump watches us as well.
I'm sure he does, and that's why we only have 2 people on our live feed at the moment, because they're the 2,
Yeah.
So, but Jimmy Kimmel, he had a kid who was very ill last year, I think.
Yeah.
And then gave up and gave a statement about their healthcare system in the US. Based on the fact that he could afford the treatment for the child, but the child almost died. But he could afford the treatment. But he was speaking up for everybody else who couldn't.
Yeah.
Now, there's a man worth noting. Don't friggin' call him a pedophile based on some boundless crap that came out of Donald Trump's mouth.
Yeah.
Because that is just wrong at all levels. And it's not just about Donald Trump, it's about anybody.
Yeah.
Like who in the hell, like these Christians who voted for, they were on Roy Moore's side? Like, why aren't we just calling them all pedophiles? Because the man clearly has a thing for young girls.
Well,
right?
He's clearly been accused of it.
The
accusation doesn't mean it's true.
Well, no, I'm just saying he has a thing for them.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting he's done anything.
Yeah.
I'm just saying he has a liking for them. So, so, and it's just these friggin' contradictions, Avery. We probably should have started with all of this because this is probably more exciting.
We are going to be making a video about does religion matter, aren't we?
We are.
We can discuss it on that. We
are. So, yes, and perhaps we should keep it for that. But the question for me is, if you have a set of values and principles, it doesn't. Your values and principles are just your values and principles. It's not. The people in Yatala, our local prison, some of them probably have a completely different set of values and principles. It's not the values and principles that have got them there; it's their behaviour.
Yeah.
That has got them there, right? So you can have any set of values and principles you like, but if you act upon them and they're against the law, you've got to find yourself in jail, right? So there are people out there with the most incredible set of values and principles, but when they act upon them by supporting people that actually realistically contravene the majority of their values and principles, except for the fact that they might be wanting to put right-wing judges in court in the US, or they believe in abortions, right?
Yeah.
But the balance of their values in terms of their behaviour and the things they say and do contradict everything else. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do. But I say all that lot, really, I think all of what we've just been talking about now, about values, stuff like that, those the particular ones you're talking about, that's for another time. And another video.
It is. And that would be a fabulous video because we could talk about that for hours and really get fired up.
You might not get a word in edgewise once I get going.
Just remember, I'm controlling the video here.
That's very true.
I'll just frickin' shut you down, mate.
That's very true.
Because I can do that. Not that I would.
No, I know.
Okay. Avery, thanks very much for being a part of all of this again.
You're very welcome. I love doing it.
Now, I kind of... Actually, I'll be quite honest. I don't give a shit how many people are on board. Yeah. I like preparing. We were pretty underprepared in sort of some of the articles that we produced today. Normally, we're much better prepared. So we do apologise for that to everybody. But can I just say in closing, Avery, get involved with the Child Protection Party. We have a lot of fun. Those other people that are our executive and others, we have a lot of fun and a lot of debates and a lot of things to talk about. You could become a part of all of that. All you have to do is join. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Go to the website at www.childprotection.party, click the membership button and fill out that form. Send us $12 and you're a member.
It's as simple as that. Yep.
Then on election day, if you see a candidate for the Child Protection Party, vote for them.
And if you want to be the person whom you're voting for,
Yeah,
as
if you
the
want to be that candidate,
then
right,
let us
write
know.
to secretary@childprotection.party.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll get you on board and we'll tell you about how to achieve your goals in terms of forming legislation that's going to change the ways that kids live their lives. And
Yeah.
I think that's pretty valuable. So thanks, everybody. And thanks, Avery, for being a party to it.
Welcome.
See you next time. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.